Hello, I'm Bill Bullard with RCAF USA, the voice of the independent cattle producer in the United States of America. Well, you may recall that in the mid-2000s, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, or USDA, was resolute in its efforts to establish a mandatory national animal identification system known then as the NAIS. The genesis for the system was the World Organization for Animal Health that wanted every nation to impose identification standards on every cattle producer. Well, in independent-minded America, that flew over like the proverbial lead balloon. Nevertheless, the USDA attempted to whip the cattle industry into submission so it would capitulate to the global mandate. USDA wanted every U.S. cattle producer to register their premises with the federal government, to affix a radio frequency identification or RFID ear tag in every head of cattle, and they wanted cattle producers to report to the government every time they moved cattle from one premises to another. Well, it didn't work. By the late 2000s, it was clear that independent U.S. cattle producers did not want their government imposing a one-size-fits-all mandate on their industry, and USDA backed down. And under then Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack, the USDA issued a final rule in 2013 titled Traceability of Livestock Moving Interstate. That final rule is now the law of the land, and it's a scaled-back version of the NAIS. It requires cattle producers to identify their adult cattle when they cross state lines, and cattle producers are afforded flexibility in deciding when and how to identify cattle moved interstate. For example, the law authorizes cattle producers to use either low-cost technology, like metal ear tags, brands, tattoos, back tags, and group lot identification, or they can use RFID. The industry has lived with this law for the past 8 years. But as proof the USDA won't let a bad idea lie, out of the blue, in April of 2019, the USDA issued a mandate stating they would phase out metal ear tags, and by 2023, all adult cattle moved interstate would be required to wear an RFID ear tag. So we sued USDA on grounds that its new mandate was unlawful and it undermined the law of the land that grants producers a choice to use low-cost technology. And about 3 weeks later, the USDA folded and withdrew its mandate, hoping that that would end the lawsuit. But we had included another allegation in our lawsuit. We also alleged that the seemingly out-of-the-blue mandate was actually a well-orchestrated, behind-the-scenes effort by USDA to undermine the legal rights of U.S. cattle producers by denying them access to low-cost technology for identifying their cattle. So our other allegation was that the USDA violated the Federal Advisory Committee Act, or FACA, by establishing and using a committee to help it to work out the details of how to transition cattle producers to exclusively use RFID technology, as well as to minimize opposition from the cattle producers themselves. And we allege it did this without following the legal steps required when federal agencies establish and use such advisory committees. Now, the purpose of FACA is to ensure that there is government transparency and that there is a balanced perspective on any advisory committee. So this week, with the legal help of Harriet Hageman of the New Civil Liberties Alliance, we filed our opening brief in our FACA case, and we allege that not only did USDA fail to follow the law, but it was disingenuous to claim it did not establish or use either the Cattle Traceability Working Group or the Producers Traceability Council that it had established and used to further its RFID goals. Now, our brief contains cites to scores of emails, working papers, meeting minutes, news releases, and a USDA strategy paper. As evidence, the agency both established the two advisory committees and then utilized them up to October of 2019, which is when we filed our lawsuit against USDA's unlawful mandatory RFID plan. Now, one of the plaintiffs in our case, Kenny Fox from South Dakota, was invited to serve on the Cattle Traceability Working Group until several members of that group complained that the group was not reaching a consensus to push forward with an RFID requirement. Consequently, the Producers Traceability Council was formed, and it was formed by excluding Fox and all others who opposed a mandatory RFID system from its membership, yet the same USDA officials who served on the Cattle Traceability Working Group continued to serve on the Producers Traceability Council. as did ear tag manufacturers and other RFID advocates. So we're seeking an injunction from the court to bar USDA from using the advice and work products it received from the advisory committee as the agency continues to forge ahead to deny cattle producers the choice to use various low-cost technologies as is currently authorized by the law of the land. So please go to our website at www.r-cafusa.com to join with us so we can become strong enough to direct your U.S. cattle industry toward a more profitable and prosperous future for you and for the next generations. With that, thank you and have a productive week. Goodbye.